Good evening, everyone. SpaceX announces another try at the Starship 13 launch. Skyroot Aerospace in India announces the first private orbital launch. It's all over the news this week. Also from India, a new sovereign tech fund was launched, and they've already made their first investment. We'll discuss that. The Space Force has tripled their contract ceiling due to increased demand, but the Government Accountability Office says they can't figure out what personnel they need for their own missions. The Space Force, that is. Astronauts just launched from Russia, and the Soyuz is sporting an energy drink ad on the outside of the capsule. Apparently, that's becoming a new tradition. iSpace US and Draper just ended their NASA CLIPS partnership. Jared Isaacman, interestingly, just personally donated $500,000 of his own money to the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation. Interesting outfit. I didn't know about them. And they've been around for 40 years. My God. British taxpayers are taking a big hit on their homegrown Starlink rival. Here's a weird one. Under the current NASA plan, apparently, astronauts marooned on the moon could be abandoned. Let that sink in. And can Starlink ever be beat? Well, the Chinese and Russians think they have a plan. All that, and our guest, Dr. Dan Garretson. From the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, my name is Thomas Andrew Olson, and this is The Unknown Quantity. As you know, this program is brought to you by the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. And what is the Center? We champion and strengthen emerging space startups and space-adjacent enterprises worldwide through advisory, access, and advocacy. Our legendary pitch events and world-class boot camps fortify startups to be better investor-ready. Now, a lot of our work, especially this podcast, is supported by our listeners and fans like you. So just go to cscf.space/support. And click this plain as day donate button. A little in the tip jar each month makes a big difference. Or a big thing in the tip jar each month will make an even bigger difference. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tell your friends. And speaking of friends, my longest space friend, Michael Lane, is not with us today. Unfortunately, he has a family emergency, and we wish him well in handling that. But not to be outdone, our able producer and overall great guy, Sean Key, is going to be filling in. So come on in, man. There he is. Yeah.
How you doing? I feel like the backup quarterback. Everybody hates me till it's time to come on.
Well, you know what? When Joe Montana was down, who came in? Steve Young. When Joe Montana retired, who came in? Steve Young. And then he got a great backup quarterback. So you know what?
Yeah.
These things happen. Thanks for doing it, man. This is great.
It's a pleasure.
Yep. Okay, who we are? Morty's here. Hi, Morty.
Hey, Morty. Look, Mom, I'm on TV.
Appointment television. Here we are, man. Okay. I guess we'll just dive right in. Right now, the first one is a pretty softball one. SpaceX announces a new target date for the 13th Starship launch. They're announcing the next launch attempt will be this coming Friday, July 24th. But they said they could launch from their Starbase facility as early as Thursday, which would be interesting because we'll be back here on Thursday. So,
yeah. Let's hope we don't jinx it.
Okay. It always seems to happen, doesn't it?
Yes.
We've jinxed like 3 of them, and we actually were there for one of them.
Yeah,
and that was
it's always like, hey, there's a launch right before the show. Oh, they scrubbed it. I guess the crew had to watch the show.
Right. Yeah, that's what it was. Really, we just scrubbed this so they could all watch the show. And if that was true, why aren't you donating more? Come on, guys. It's tax deductible. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah, I need some new shoes.
Yeah. I mean, $100 each from the entire crew. That would make our year, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's
So
see
that's
here.
that. Really, the interesting news today is coming from India over the weekend. An outfit called Skyroot Aerospace. They launched their first private sector orbital launch.
There we go. How to continue to the site. Skyroot.
Yep, there we go.
Well, this I like this. I like seeing the other, especially like India, and we get more and more. Besides the regular players into the industry, we're starting to see the development in other countries, and that's great.
I personally, I'm loving it. I know the word sovereign makes Michael shake a little bit, but it's happening. It's happening everywhere.
Yeah, but I think it's important. You have a right to your country's identity and to cherish it and enshrine it. But I mean, the whole thing at the end of the day is that we want to excel at what we do. But we also want to cooperate. So there's a balancing act between the two. So while I understand that some people get upset about sovereignty, I just think it's a natural thing. It's part of our history.
That's what I think. Yeah, absolutely. But given the situation, we've seen this private company do their first launch. Obviously, like we launch from NASA-owned property. They're launching from ISRO-owned property in India. I don't think we pay enough attention to what's going on with ISRO and with the private sector community. I think that's an oversight I'm going to try to do something about in future months and years. Because something else happened as a result of this launch, not as a direct result of it, but it's kind of a piggyback.
Right.
About the same time, an organization in India called the Antarish Venture Capital Fund, and it's managed by SIDBI Venture Capital Limited. They've executed an opening investment. They have a fund that wants to invest in some space stuff. They have like it's about, I don't know, maybe a $20 million fund, maybe a $50 million fund. I have trouble sometimes translating their currency because they have this word called a crore, CRORE. I had to look it up. A crore is their word for 10 million. So I presume a crore is in 10 million, rupees, and they have a new fund with 500 crore. I think it came out to about $50 million, which is not chump change. And they've already made their first investment in a company called Garuva Space, and they're a space engineering solution provider. And what they got was the equivalent of about 6.2 million US dollars. So that's not chump change either for an initial investment.
Yeah, that's actually
that's pretty good. They're serious, and they're taking it seriously, and they're trying to help build through their own private sector, their own sovereign capacity. So that's cool. Then we have two conflicting things. At first, the U.S. Space Force is, I always hit that link by accident from Space News because they don't let you in unless you pay, but you can kind of get the gist at least. They had a ceiling of a major national security launch contract. They just tripled the ceiling to $17 billion as the military prepares for a sharp increase in satellite missions. And that's significant, but all that money that's going into the Golden Dome, I'm sure, had a lot to do with this.
Right.
And they got given a whole ton of money no matter what. And so they got to figure out how to spend it now effectively, which creates an interesting conundrum that I saw in a report from the Government Accountability Office that says Space Force can't figure out what personnel it needs for its missions. They're seeking more money in headcount, but thousands of the so-called required jobs went unfilled last year. And they're still unfilled. So they lack a solid methodology to track and use troops, civilian workers, contractors, and probably a lot of other things. They have not established a process or a guidance to consistently and accurately determine its personnel needs to accomplish its missions. The GAO just put out this report last Friday. Well, I don't know what to say about that. It's just like, hey, you're given just a crap ton of money and you don't know how to spend it. I've never seen this before.
Yeah. I have a suspicion it has to do. So my son is in the Air Force and he works in a field that's closely related to space. And he said whenever they came along with the Space Force, they took the ones that the really brainiac ones that really couldn't really function in the Air Force and took them to Space Force.
And they do all the digital stuff, right?
Yeah. And he goes, the rest of us that can actually function amongst regular people, we got left in the Air Force. And when you bring that up and they're like, they can't figure out, well, it just makes me think there's a gap there somewhere.
Yeah. Just a little one.
Yeah.
Just a little one. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, God.
But yeah, I mean, so they get the money. I think what it is you get an infusion of money rapidly, and you're trying to spend it as quickly as you get it. It kind of leads to I don't have enough people. I don't even know what I need to fill.
Yeah.
So I think they're still figuring out what they need in this process because you get big dreams, but you don't have the big plans to go with the big dreams. So you got the big money.
Mm-hmm.
So
Catch-22. Yeah, I know. So there is that. See what I mean about the news being so weird tonight?
Yeah.
So astronauts launched on a Soyuz rocket had an energy drink ad on the outside of it. And apparently this is becoming a Russian tradition.
Capitalism, baby.
Yeah. And there was an ad for Limonade, Lit Energy. And there it is. And it's in English even written on there, Lit Energy. Really, there's some other stuff painted on the side of that thing too.
Man, there would be Pizza Hut. There'd be all kinds of things on the side. If I was
I know. Well, that was the joke way back when we still had the shuttle. We should we should sell ads and stick them over the shuttle. And that imagery looked funny.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've heard that before. Somebody had the idea. Was it a thing that somebody wanted to take on the side of the space station? I think the ISS. They wanted to do digital ads by just using a laser to print out, put the image of a logo or something on there.
Uh-huh.
It was years and years ago. I don't remember. I was adjacent to the industry. I wasn't in the industry, so, but right. But I heard of it, and I just like, well, that's wild. That would be wild. But it's one way to make it commercial.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's what they're doing. Okay. Now, here's an interesting thing. I think it's just because a lot of the clip stuff has kind of been put on hold for a while,
right?
In certain ways. But iSpace US and Draper had a partnership to develop a lunar lander for the NASA's commercial lunar payload services. Well, on July 15th, they said the two companies had mutually agreed to end their partnership to develop a lander and fly it to the moon. And I don't know if that's a result of them not getting along or the shift in NASA's policy of late.
I suspect it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think the shift exposed the stress of them not really getting, not merging together as a partner.
Yeah.
But that's just a suspicion. It's just not.
Yeah.
Don't take it for gospel, folks. I'm just
That was,
gossiping.
yeah, that was the experience of COTS. Orbital Sciences and SpaceX came out of COTS, but
Right.
rocket plane Kistler, oh man, they crashed and burned so hard.
Yeah,
Because they couldn't figure out how to work together.
Yeah, well, that's with any business in any industry, that you're going to have that. Wells Fargo, honestly, it's not really Wells Fargo. It's just Wells Fargo by name. When they merged with the Northern, I forgot the name of the bank up in North. It was the winner of that was the management of that bank, not Wells Fargo. They just really kind of kept the branding name because it had a stronger brand. And then that's before Wells Fargo had all its problems, with making fake accounts and all that. And I can tell you some stories about that. I know them pretty well because I had to go clean up the mess.
Oh, okay. All right.
But the management kind of pushed out the Wells Fargo management, and then you're left with their attitude towards turning the bank into stores instead of being banks. And then same thing happens. Chrysler and Fiat. They are still struggling with. They're not quite merging together.
Yeah. It looks like Dallas Beanhoff has the answer for us. Right there. Draper won the CLPS Award and hired iSpace to build the lander. And the reason was that iSpace had issues with their engine development. So they had to redesign the lander, which pushed the launch to 2030.
Oh, that's cool.
So they threw up their hands, I guess.
And for the rest of the story.
Yeah.
That's the cover.
Yep.
We're going to tell them that.
Yep.
I'm not going to tell them I hate you. I'm just going to tell them that.
Yep. That's our story, and we're sticking to it.
Exactly.
Okay.
But no, it seems to be legit, though. I mean, that would make a reasonable sense.
Yep. Well, I guess I never heard of this for a while, or maybe I heard of it and I just forgot. There's this nonprofit called the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation, and it's for it's educational stuff and a whole bunch of other things, and tries to encourage kids to get involved and STEM and stuff like that. Apparently, Jared Isaacman, on his own dime, just made a transformational $500,000 personal commitment to the foundation. And in their entire 40-year history, that's the largest one-time individual gift. And so they're pretty happy about it. And I thought it says a lot about his character as well. So I was happy to see this.
He's really, he's done a lot for the industry. He's really putting his money where, his mouth is.
Yep.
He's stepping out there and trying to, as I say, and one of the things I hold dear to me, you have a responsibility to be a steward to the industry if you want to be a part of the industry.
Yep, absolutely.
And he's being a very good steward.
And continues to be one.
Yeah.
So I hope he sticks around a while. All right. Actually, we're making good time here. This is great.
Yeah, because I don't go off on tangents like Michael does.
Yeah.
I'm not yelling at the screen. Stop, Michael. We have a time limit.
I know. God, it's just it's so.
Yes, Michael. If you're watching this, I am picking on you. I'm just kidding.
We love you, Michael. We just
we got to tease a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the next one is here's one about money. It doesn't look good for them. Apparently, the British taxpayers got on the hook for 340 million plus pounds to invest in, quote unquote, a rival to Elon Musk's Starlink turned sour. So they were talking about it's a combination of OneWeb and somebody else, because that whole page was on there for me just 3 hours ago. And so now they're Now they want a bunch of stuff. So, okay.
That one
Well,
web slumps.
I had the whole page available just 2 hours ago. That's what it was. It was OneWeb, which has always been having problems, and another outfit that they had that was helping them. And apparently they're not doing very well. They're not keeping up. As you can see from the share price, it went, way down.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're going to do. Well, maybe the Chinese and the Russians will have better luck. We'll find out then too. But before we do that, this is a weird thing. It's in Forbes. It says astronauts marooned on the moon could be abandoned under the current NASA plan. There's a fundamental flaw in their master plan for the lunar landings that could prove fatal to the first American astronauts set to touch down on the moon in 2028. And that says people at the Office of the Inspector General. And that's vaguely important. Because I know a guy who's like 90 something. He was an Inspector General back during the Apollo days. So I heard stories. And it says, while NASA is taking steps to prevent catastrophic events from occurring during the Artemis missions, at some point in the future, astronauts will likely encounter a life-threatening emergency in space. And NASA may not have the capability to rescue the stranded crew when that happens. So it's basically, but that was the case in 1969. The 57th anniversary of which is today. So,
right.
How much does this matter?
I think that's just somebody stretching for news because, we're inherently, there's a group of people on the fringe of being a humanity that's willing to take life-threatening risk to push the envelope, to help humanity expand.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not sure if I'm one of those guys. I know I've jumped out of airplanes. I miss doing that. I've been in hostile fire zones where people threw lead at me very angrily. I've been in firefighter. I've done that. I've been a blue collar guy to about my mid 30s, and then I tried to transition over to this white collar thing. I feel like an outsider half the time, but there's people that are willing to take their risk, and this is something we know,
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that sometimes the news is just trying to capture something that how would you set up a rescue mission for the first attempt to get there?
Yeah.
And like Dal said, is a lot of what ifing.
Right. The inability to leave the moon story. There's a lot of what. We had the same what ifing back then. Just no one remembers that.
Yeah. I mean, I could come up scenarios. We can just sit here through a month of Sundays and still not cover all the possible scenarios. So.
But somehow we punch through all that and do it anyway.
Yeah, we do. We take those chances. I mean, there is a point where you have to take a calculated risk, and whether it's a simple thing for just everyday life, like do I do this or do I do that? I don't know. I'm just going to do this and figure it out. It's kind of what we're doing here on a major scale of humankind.
Yeah. Well, Dallas is saying now maybe you can run for senator in Maine. I don't want you leaving Florida, man. Forget it. No. Not going to happen.
It is too cold in Maine.
Yeah.
I don't care for politics. My mother asked me why I didn't run for politics because, here's a little unknown fact is that my great grandfather on my dad's side, which would be my grandmother's grandfather, was Governor Cone of Florida.
Oh, okay.
And so I got a picture of my son shaking Barack Obama's hands at his graduation from the Air Force Academy, and my dad shaking Bill Clinton's hands when he came to Jacksonville, and the unions were lining up because my dad was head of the millwright union out of Jacksonville. And I got to find a president to shake hands with, but that's the extent of my political ambition. And I told my mom, I said, there's no way I could be a politician because I would throw hands.
Yep. Okay. Final thing. So this is from National Review. Apparently, China and Russia are trying to work together to figure out a plan to limit Elon Musk's Starlink just a little bit. So they had some documents came out. They made claims to be some sort of neutral in the Russo-Ukrainian war, but they're supposed to have a report that's worth. He relates it. According to research, a well thought of Latvia-based investigative website, China and Russia are working on a joint plan to kill Starlink. They're trying to gain an advantage and get ahead.
This is the launch of space warfare right here.
Yep, it really is. It really is. They're satellite. Well, also they're saying the satellite density raises the risk of collisions in low orbit.
Well, that's true.
Yep.
But I mean, they're actively trying to interrupt operations in space for commercial operations in space for their gain. That's basically space warfare, essentially.
Yep.
The start of it.
So what they want to do is they want to make their own requests in the international body. They would jointly file for critical frequency bands and orbital slots to try to obstruct future deployment from Starlink. And they can
going through
so they can and of course Google's DeepMind CEO said he had a proposal for a new international watchdog that would do rigorous tests and reviews of cutting-edge AI models before release. And of course, they say it's plenty of reasons why that's probably a terrible idea. One of them is the advantage it would hand Beijing, which has no interest in playing
by the rules
by others.
Yeah, and that's the reason why So I'm not one of those who are anti-climate change. I am very much so. I do believe the climate is changing and we have an impact on it. But our impact compared to some of the other players is less. Mm-hmm. And they have no incentive to follow the rules.
Right. They get a free pass. China and India especially, they get a free pass every time.
Yeah. And there's no way to enforce it. Are we going to just chop our foot off out just by being a good sport?
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
In those circumstances, I just understand why that's unenforceable, and it's not practical to sign up with any of those agreements. It's irrational to do so.
Well, I always think in terms of we are all descended from people who survived in Ice Age with nothing but furs and flint and sticks.
So this time around, we learn how to swim.
And so this time around, we know how to swim. We have education. Supposedly, we know how to build air conditioning. We shouldn't have to complain too much. We should be able to figure things out.
Well, it's the modern age. We like to complain.
Yeah. I just lost you, Sean. Is it me or you? Oh dear.
In some factories,
there you go.
17-hour day, 15th century diseases and stuff, the black lung, and I got the clip, it's just no sense of, we have made so much progress and we're only going to get better. It's just always boo-hoo, we're terrible. And that's just, to me, it's a crock shit, basically.
Okay. Let us move on to our guest this evening.
Yes, sir.
Our guest is returning guest, actually, Dr. Dan Garretson. He's a space economy and defense strategist, and he's coming here with an update on his new initiative, Orbital Progress, which did not exist the last time we spoke with him. So I can't wait to hear about it. Dan, come on in, man.
Right here.
There he is.
There he is.
Great to see you.
Okay, let's start with the easy part. Could do the softball one first. Just take a minute or two and tell us a little bit. Remind everybody of your background and how you got here and what gets you up in the morning.
Sounds good. Yeah, so background, been excited about space probably most of my life. But that manifested by getting a PhD early on in astrophysics. And then, sort of working in that. And then early 2000s, actually had the opportunity to go into the DC area and actually join something called the Science and Technology Policy Institute, where I led the space portfolio under the Institute for Defense Analysis. And that was around the time that SpaceX was getting going, that there was a lot of questions about US space launch capability. And so really got deeply involved as SpaceX was starting to get underway, trying to sort of make the case for some investment. Ultimately, that led to the COTS program. So this is about the 2004, 2006 timeframe. Working with them, did a lot of work on P&T strategy, position, navigation, and timing. And a ton of related stuff, launch propulsion. But one of the big takeaways from that for me, so I after I left academia, I actually ended up in the consulting world, McKinsey & Company, for a few years before I did the space work. So came in with that very sort of business-oriented approach and or capitalism, as Sean mentioned earlier. And so was really looking at what was going on and the potential for building markets. And that was what I thought was really interesting about Elon's approach at the time with SpaceX, trying to really think about how do we restructure how we think about paying for space assets rather than doing it on a cost plus kind of basis or regular, essentially licensed technology for, or I should say, building up technology by the primes and so forth. It's like, how do we bring this as a fixed price kind of capability? And of course, that led to the COTS program, and everybody at that time was saying how he was going to fail. I remember multiple meetings with primes and such. He has no idea what he's doing. He's going to fail. Well, obviously that didn't happen. But that I think really led to a lot of interesting transformation, and that's of course where we are with space launch capabilities ramping up rapidly, them dominating a lot of the launch capabilities. And I think it's a lot of the mindset they brought along the way. I think where we are now is very similar to that. And so been watching a lot about what's been going on in terms of the formation of markets. How do we really get to a real capitalism in space kind of mindset? So over the last few years, been really working a lot more on kind of thinking about the whole sort of merging that sort of business mentality in. And so we launched Orbital Progress a couple of months ago. Spent the last couple of months really setting up a lot of the institutional infrastructure for that, but all about really stimulating and driving that market mentality. Capitalism in space.
Good. Here's the thing. You mentioned this. You did a post this morning, which I responded to, and you thanks for posting that. You gave us a plug.
Of course.
But what you mentioned basically is still to this day, most of that commercial launch and everything else we're doing is all government driven. Government purchase orders. That's what's driving most of it. The billions and billions that are being spent every year. But you said actual true private on private work only amounts to about $6 billion of that total.
Well, let me edit that just a little bit.
Okay.
So if you look at the growth of the space economy over 2015 to 2025, so about that 10-year stretch, the growth about 70 billion in growth in the kind of the space economy, and there's different ways of measuring that. We can get into that, of course. Sure. But there's about 70 billion in growth in terms of stuff that was driving space sustaining activity, and by that I mean revenues going into building the satellites, building the ground infrastructure, building the launch vehicles, and all the capabilities that ultimately drive revenue from direct space applications. So 70 billion in growth, 90% of that was government, it's about 64 billion or so, but only 6 billion was commercial activity. So
B2B as opposed to G2B, I guess.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Okay. So yeah. So you've formed this organization to fix that?
To really try to figure out how do we continue to stimulate the growth. I don't necessarily want to limit government growth here. Government funding is driving a lot, and of course we've seen a huge surge. We've got the space race to the moon driving a lot of activity by both NASA, China, et cetera. The Europeans trying to get in on the game. You talked about the launch in India. and earlier in the show. So lots of folks jumping in, lots of money going in. The concern is it's a lot driven by these missions, national security, exploration, so forth. Firm believer in capitalism, believe that the real thing that's going to drive long-term growth is if we could start to build markets on top of that. So the way I see it, government's going to fund a lot of the infrastructure, their own reasons. Not going to question that. I might actually, but there's a ton of rationale for that. Let's make sure that converts into market-sustaining activity that can really convert into value creation going forward. And SpaceX is a great example. I mentioned that it only grew $6 billion over that 10-year time frame. If it wasn't for SpaceX, there actually would have been a decline in the commercial revenue. Would have fallen. But if you look at it, what happened, it was big, essentially a turnover, even just the last couple of years, where that $6 billion, if it wasn't for Starlink, you wouldn't have seen even that growth.
Well, and that's the thing about SpaceX is SpaceX takes the win out of the room because SpaceX is the win. Because when you take out the number of launches that the U.S. has completed, take SpaceX out of that equation, we are behind China.
Yep.
And I champion that. I say that constantly because I want to hammer home SpaceX success is great, but it's great for SpaceX.
Yep.
And we have to capture the opportunity that SpaceX shows as a community, as an industry. And
right.
That's what makes me wonder though, because I saw something, I wrote about it. I saw that the way SpaceX went, they integrated their vertical value chain to a point where it's not really SpaceX as a space company, but SpaceX as an AI company.
SpaceX AI.
Yeah. And so is it a tech play? And they just happen to operate in space. And if that's the way forward, are we going to see pharmaceuticals do this? Are we going to see other space companies do this? And they're just going. Space becomes a domain, and not necessarily the industry that we think of right now.
Which I think that's actually the great outcome, right? So if it's now an enabler, but it's a key enabler.
Mm-hmm.
The way I think about SpaceX is they got to space, they didn't find some vast commercial market, and so they've been building it with Starlink, starting point, and we'll see if space-based data centers become that next major market that they build.
Yeah,
that's a hard one.
I just want to caution everybody on the idea of space-based data centers. It's not going to look like what you think it is. If it does become, it's definitely not going to be Connex boxes in space.
And that's because of physics.
Yeah, because of physics. Physics is a constraint you can't get around. But there's engineering that you can do. Is it economically viable? We don't know. Maybe the conditions will change. But it doesn't prohibit. It just tells you what you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
And because I came off the fence, I said it's going to happen. I hear everybody make a comment. Well, somebody obviously didn't pay attention to physics. Somebody needs to ask my son's an astrophysicist as well. He got his degree he got conferred his degree just recently.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, out of UNLV. I think his was he come up with a process where you measure the nuclei instead of doing 27,000 cuts, you just do it in one clump, something like that, out of a black hole or something like that. I don't know. I kind of phased out a little bit through his dissertation defense. I'm trying to hang in there, and I'm like, oh my goodness, put some dollar signs in front so I can understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I know we got a good stream of consciousness going here. And I like it. So, but before we start streaming again, Jason, one of our listeners here, has had a question I thought was interesting. He said, "Is SpaceX an isolated situation? Has launch costs actually been reduced, or is it just being temporarily influenced?"
I mean, I would say depends on how you define that. For them, for SpaceX, launch costs are definitely quite a bit lower than elsewhere, and that's part of why why a lot of what they're doing is so viable is they control their own launch stack at a lower cost.
Yeah, they've been doing that they tailored their company that way. They bring in the outside suppliers and make them part of the supply chain so they control costs and I don't know. It's going to be an interesting case study of SpaceX that now that we have the IPO, we can actually get a lot more detail about the company than we ever had openly. And now we can sit down, and I'm just kind of curious what this business studies are going to show.
I'm hopeful that ultimately we get a couple other providers going. You start to get that competitive flywheel going, and we start to see those launch costs start to be reflected in the way others start to operate as well.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think Rocket Lab, is working at emulating that same type of stack. And New Glenn, I know Michael's a fan of New Glenn, but not New Glenn, Blue Horizon.
Blue Origin.
Blue Origin, excuse me. But it's getting late. I'm tired. Blue Origin. But here's the deal about Blue Origin. Amazon is Amazon. Blue Origin is a pet project.
Yep.
And where SpaceX wasn't a pet project, it was the project.
That exactly. And they, they've done great things in terms of transforming it. I mean, they really have made it possible, with the transporter missions that opened up space for a lot of the smaller satellite plays. Heck, I'm aware of folks putting together the CubeSats in high schools. Yeah. So, and you're getting that talent. And that's what I think is ultimately, we've now had a bunch of new SpaceX millionaires and a few billionaires formed. They're going to be spreading out and bringing that thinking and expertise to other companies. And I think we'll see a lot of evolution in that over time. And ultimately, there's a lot of what I'm hoping like Orbital Progress can do is a lot about sort of monitoring where these markets are forming. What are some of the signals that these are actually going to be real consumer-driven markets as opposed to simply government funding a new line of activity repeatedly, and doing that measurement and really sort of saying, how do we encourage that growth? How do we sort of make sure that both the buyers and the suppliers are structuring their activity to really drive that market growth as opposed to simply supporting the latest sort of government mission? So market's not mission, not capability. Exactly. So I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's brilliant. Tom, do you have a question?
No, actually, I'm just having fun listening to you guys. But I when I'm seeing this, I'm just reminded of something we spoke about briefly before the show, which Sean mentioned, which was since you're set up as a nonprofit, you have a great incentive to do it right.
That is exactly the idea.
Yeah.
So we're looking to get sort of sponsorship for different studies that we're doing. We're kind of raising the donations and exactly that to keep us independent, so that we're not getting into that advocacy role, but much more saying, let's be hard-nosed about what's really forming here. Yep. I think of an example like the CLDs, which is very timely. We've got the new draft RFP out from NASA on funding the CLD program, Commercial LEO Destinations. I'm assuming everybody knows that. But NASA publicly questioned earlier in the year this. We don't see really evidence of the markets forming, and of course the industry came back and said no, there really is. And so I would say the CLD RFP is an answer to that. Well, where are those forming? What are what are CLDs going to enable? The claims are things like manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, semiconductors, et cetera, tissue growth, and obviously tourism is often talked about there.
Yeah.
What are the signs that are going to show those are going to be really viable markets? And how do we start to nurture where they're happening? How should NASA be structuring their flow of activity to validate and prove out the markets over time? Kind of what what the COTS program and and the other commercial procurement programs are, setting milestones for saying this is where we know it's happening in a positive way, and let's enable the next step then.
Okay, so basically, what you're saying you're going to do, you're going to go do a deep dive under the hood of the CLD proposals and what they really expect to get out of this.
A deep dive, and also it's looking at where those markets are emerging, so being able to track that, so visibility, but then engaging the ecosystem to really bring that thinking, that commercial mindset. It's a lot of space companies, reasonably so, they're all about where do we get the next government contract, because that's what's making a lot of it successful. But how do we turn that thinking into how do we make our product sufficiently repeatable, standardizable, that we can actually now sell it to multiple scale, etc. Yep.
Okay.
So bringing that thinking to a deep diving into that whole process, laying that out, and then driving the activity forward.
And this is what I appreciate about the site when I started digging through it, is that because you don't have to compete with narratives, you just have to focus on first principles and work your way through that way. To me, that's refreshing. I mean, I've coined the term, phantom finance, and then there's actualized finance. Is whenever everybody talks about money, but has it really been deployed? We're X amount of money, we're this amount of money, but has it been deployed? Have you deployed any money? Have you actualized any money? To me, that's the more interesting topic, because that's the more realistic topic, because it's the more accurate topic. I can tell you, I can have $10 million and tell you that I'm worth 200 million. And if somebody agrees with me, okay, that sounds great, but it's only good if I can get a bank that's convinced of it to lend me some money. But what really matters is the actual money I have, which is the $10 million that I can actually transfer. So, and this industry runs on that. I don't know the good analogy to, like it's laughing gas at the dentist.
Yeah. Well, it's also a little bit, some of these people you talk to, we've had them on our show, and they sound like George Costanza.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the truth if you believe it.
Yeah. Love it. Yep. So, sure, there's a lot of that drives a lot of investment, and obviously we've seen a lot of investment in the space economy from people with that kind of story. But what's real here? How do we turn this into something that's actually going to drive, hopefully, the opportunity for me to go into space and try out the space hotel kind of thing. But that depends on those costs continuing to come down, unless somebody throws $1 billion my way or so. But those costs continue to come down. A lot of the capabilities to accelerate that way.
Yeah, I would like to check it out myself. As Dr. Doug Plata keeps telling me, stay healthy. Stay healthy. You can come along. So
exercise, take your vitamins, lay off the beer.
You should see the vitamins piled up over here. My God.
All right.
Yep.
So what I do when I write with the investors in mind. But the one thing I keep on coming across is that there's a big mismatch with investment products and tools in the space industry, because a VC that's used to doing software launches and funding and financing, or stepping into hardware, that's two different games. That's two different ball games. The timelines can be different depending on what they're building. And sometimes, and once the VC's timeline is over with and they have to close out that contract, what bag are you left with if you're an entrepreneur? So I think that's what's the interesting thing to me, is how is capital going to adjust and evolve to accommodate and help the industry mature.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a bit of a flywheel at some point. So I've also been talking to folks in the insurance and credit market side of the industry, and right now it's very hard for them to figure out how to lend against an asset. I mean, you lend against a satellite. What's that satellite worth if the the guy that you're lending the money to goes bankrupt and you reinvest it? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to monetize that investment? So there's a lot that has to go into creating that repeatability and that the mechanisms that allow them to finance that. But if they do, credit is a lot cheaper source of money than equity.
Yeah.
They can and entrepreneurs can start to do more. And so it's getting those flywheels going and making that standardization, making this much more of a repeatable process that can really be lent against or otherwise drive the growth of the economy.
We plan on having a guy for insurance in a week or two for space insurance. That's exclusively what that company does. Come on the show, which I'm excited to see. And I've actually wrote about just a hypothetical financial bond or infrastructure bond for the space industry, as a way for these companies to raise some money. Because to help our viewers understand what the problem is that if you're building infrastructure, you're usually not going to get capital revenue coming in until after you built the infrastructure and starting getting your first people. It's like a toll road. You don't get money till the first car goes through the toll booth, and you have to have it completed by then. So these companies are, coming along and investing like a VC does. They're expecting revenues at a certain time. That doesn't happen till the very end. So it's the reason why I say it's a mismatch. It's a mismatch of what the VC is expecting. That's the reason why you see between round C and D a drop off between companies that are trying to develop their technology to that point where they're ready to scale. There's only a few companies that are actually scaling.
Right. And part of that's they're not delivering the value for the government contractors in some cases, or they're not finding the dual use consumer markets that they may have projected. And that's again part of the thinking we want to bring to the table is how do you start to identify those much more reliably and ideally sooner to really drive that growth.
And I think part of the problem for that to develop, we have to really lock down mass, make it more reliable to bring stuff back, and more safe and more easily repeatable. Bring our product, services, and people back from space.
Yeah, well, I mean, many of the potential markets. I was seeing some commentary on some of the pharmaceutical manufacturing, semiconductor manufacturing. That down mass is critical to make those markets.
And there's still regulatory barriers.
Yeah.
And so we just have to, we have to really look at reducing those at this point.
Regulatory barriers and regulatory confusion.
A lot of that.
A lot of different agencies trying to figure out how do they work together. You may have followed the Varda example, whatever that was a year or two ago, where they had the satellite in orbit. You get the FAA and the range managers and all to agree on the permissions to bring it back.
Hi, Veronica.
Hi, Veronica. I want to circle back really quickly. I had something when you're talking about bankruptcy. Usually, on terrestrial businesses, they go bankrupt. The senior investors usually have the preferred shares, and they end up getting the assets. And what they do in 98% of the cases is just sell off the assets piece by piece, so they can claw back a little bit of their original investment. What happens with a space asset like that? It's not going to be that easy, I would think, especially if it's a commercial space station or an AI thing that's they just couldn't make a go of it, but it's still hardware that's sitting up there. And so what happens in that case? It's not so easy.
Which is exactly why you don't have those insurance and credit markets really formed at all in the space sector yet. That's the sort of thing is like when a guy goes bankrupt, you got to have some residual value for the credit markets to be able to price appropriately.
That's why a lot of guys I know ended up using a captive.
They
got away with some of it by bringing in a captive.
Bringing assets captive. Which is why Varda returns to Australia.
Exactly. I thought. So basically, what we need is a repo man or woman for space. That's what you're telling me.
Well, that same guy driving that car. Yeah, that's it.
I'm going to take that satellite back, buddy.
Tracy Walter up there driving that car. Repo man's life always intense.
Modularity, so you can take advantage of the all the cost that was used to put up a solar panel and replace out the electronics to have a new system. All sorts of things need to start to come into play here to make this work.
That would be a great follow-on, though, because that movie that came out of China or someplace, or maybe Taiwan a few years ago, called Space Sweepers. It was actually quite funny and quite popular. They made some money, and maybe the follow-on would be Space Repo Men or something. That's what we need to see now.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, we got about 5 minutes left. You want to ask our final?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we're getting to the end here, guys. It gone that fast? Okay,
Yeah, we could
there's
cut
something
them
standard
short.
we do, and given what you're currently working on, I'd love to ask you this question. We always do what we call a 525. Let us know what your world looks like, or the space world looks like, the space business, community, the industry. What does it look like 5 years from now, and 25 years from now?
So the big thing that I'm looking for is the growth of real competition. So we talked about launch earlier, and the fact that SpaceX is the only one that really seems to have driven down the cost substantially. Looking for other launch vehicles, I think we'll start to see some being successful in that time frame, starting to show some real potential competition. Obviously, we hope that Blue Origin is able to get flying again and start to get the flywheel going there. Rocket Lab, we talked about earlier. I'm very optimistic we'll start to see that kind of competition driving that growth, and then turning that into some of the repeatable capabilities. I'm optimistic we'll start to see growth in things like Earth observing. I think there's some really interesting use cases emerging. And so we'll start to see some real evidence of markets beyond just the core communications that really is the only real example of commercial markets: communications, broadcast TV, broadcast satellite, and so forth. Those are great, but let's start to see other capabilities, and I think we will over that time frame. Start to see signs at least.
Sure.
So 25 years out, I think I would be I'm optimistic we'll start to see real economic activity, not just the signs of it that we'll see in 5 years with the launch turning to drive other things, but we'll start to see a much broader set of industries really playing a bigger role, more markets coming into focus and driving some of that growth. Is it going to be things like manufacturing? I'm optimistic that we'll find some of the use cases that really do add a lot of value based on space, and we'll start to see some of those kinds of use cases emerging. Manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, tissue growth even. And if we see the decline in launch costs, if Starship gets flying, if New Glenn gets flying and things like that, and we see things going down, I'd hope to see some real space tourism. Not sure we'll see it on the moon. That's still be the billionaires, the Jared Isaacmans of the world, maybe going to the lunar vacations. But hopefully at least in the orbit, in orbit, we'll start to see more of those.
Okay. Well, Jason just posted 5 years, 100 people in space, 25 years, 100,000. This is something that we never talked about, but some people bring it up. How many people do you expect who are going to be in space? So, because I think the max is 73 people in 1 year. Over the year, I mean,
is it? Yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I actually would be in line probably with Jason. That would be about what I would expect to see in that time frame as well. A lot of it's still going to be concentrated in orbit as opposed to on the moon, but much more activity, and that type of growth seems reasonable.
Cool.
Okay. Do you see manufacturing in general, terrestrial manufacturing, moving into space and just taking it off the Earth for whatever reason, just to help clean things up?
I am optimistic we'll be an off-world species in the next 50 to 100 years or something like that. So we'll see everything going into space in that case.
Yeah.
Now, in the near term, that's and what would we see is kind of the other side of it. Some of it would be, is it going to make sense moving into space? But things like a lot of heavy manufacturing, why not? So that assumes that we get the launch costs down and things like Starship flying, more competition, a lot of the flywheel going, which I'm of course optimistic on as well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I definitely see electronics going up there because the stuff they make is made out of materials most of which are just as easy to find on the moon as they are, or in the asteroids as they are anywhere else. And they might, if they're already in orbit or even out in cislunar space, they've got better options at supply chains than they might otherwise.
Yep. We're at that early stage of uncovering a new market, and this is kind of like discovering the new world back in the whatever it was, 1500s, 1600s, and starting to figure out how do we get there reliably, how do we fix navigation in those cases or whatever. Now we're figuring out how to get there reliably, start to build up the infrastructure, and then start to figure out where it actually adds value.
Right. because the Industrial Revolution didn't happen for another 200 years.
There you go.
Once we arrived. So and we're doing it again. We're doing it again. A new Industrial Revolution.
Lots of experimentation and figuring it out.
Absolutely. And on that, Dr. Dan Garretson, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, sir.
I love what you're doing with Orbital Progress. So we will definitely have you back when you maybe reach another critical milestone and hear what you have to say on that. That aspect.
And stick around for after the show for a few minutes. We can talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we always do a post-mortem. I don't know why they call it that, but we do that. We're not dead yet.
All right.
Dan, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Okay. So interesting. It's going to be interesting show on Thursday. We're, in addition to being potentially graced with a Starship 13 launch, if we're lucky, Michael Camp, the CEO of Honeycomb Hydro, will be joining us. He's going to talk about biological stuff and agricultural stuff and stuff that he's been doing actually in a completely different industry, which is the medicinal cannabis industry. And
Weed in space.
That's it. Weed in space. We're going to be talking about that. And because I think actually hemp is basically God's plant. It can provide you with just about anything, and it replenishes the soil as it goes. And so that should be the biggest, maybe not a cash crop, but it's certainly a sustainability crop on places like Mars. And so we'll be talking about that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And on that, for Michael Lane, who couldn't be with us tonight, best of luck to him and his mom. Sean Key, head of production, thank you so much for being with me today.
Pleasure, man. Pleasure.
And I remain Thomas Andrew Olson. Keep watching the skies.